All right, everyone. It is 12:02. We're going to get started. Welcome to our workshop for today. We're so excited to have you here. We're curious how you're arriving today. If you would not mind putting one word into the chat box, how are you arriving today? Um, could be an emotion, it could be a thought. However you're arriving, we're excited to have you here. Thank you. Tired but happy. Yes, that's great. Energized. Fantastic. Enthusiastic and ready. Oh, sick with a cold. We're glad you're here with us. Thank you for joining, even though you're sick with a cold. All right, tired and ready to go. Okay, so we have a lot of sort of mixed emotions here, mixed feelings. But we're so happy to have you. So let's get started. I'm just going to do a quick introduction into myself, and I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, and then we're going to hear a little bit more from you. So my name is Erica Brenton. I've been an educator for over 20 years now. I started my career as a New York City public school teacher. I then became very invested in social emotional learning and became a social emotional learning specialist. I am a consultant with the School Culture and Climate Initiative, and I live in Montclair, New Jersey, with my husband and two children. So I have a middle school child and an elementary school child, and a lot of snow. I'm sure everyone here also is baked in a lot of snow right now, so that's so not fun. And in my free time, I like to go on long walks and read and spend time with my family. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Kathleen McClay, who's going to be joining me today.
Hello everyone. I'm Kathleen. I'm a trainer with the Positive Discipline Association, and through that work, I've been sharing relational leadership strategies with schools, parents, counselors for many years. I'm also a school climate specialist at the School Culture and Climate Initiative, just as Erica is. My degree, special ed, much of my teaching was in early childhood education as a director and owner. I live in New Jersey, so I'm deep in the snow with all of many of you. My kids are grown and flown mostly, and I like to travel, hike, sit on the beach, and read a good book. Rarely
Oh,
happens, but I like to do that.
beach sounds nice right about now.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks, Kathleen.
hmm
So
So if
we'd
you
love
want
to
to,
see.
oh, go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead, Kathleen. Is this my slide
Go
or your
ahead.
slide? Oh,
You'd
okay.
go with
And
it.
then I'm handing over to you. Kathleen and I have presented a lot together, so we're happy to be doing this collaboratively. Um, so we'd love to hear a little bit more about you. If you wouldn't mind, just but you don't have to put your name in the chat, but we'd love to know where you are located. Maybe you're here in New Jersey with us. Um, and what is your position or what is your connection to today's topic? So, are you a parent? Are you an educator? Feel free to tell us how old your children are if you are a parent, um, or a caregiver. So, love to hear a little bit more about you. Kathleen, you got a little compliment in the chat, grown and flown. I love it, and I'm going to steal it for future use. Kind of
Yeah,
sums everything up perfectly.
it's a bittersweet phase.
Oh, we have someone from Florida coming in. Welcome. Oh, just outside of North Carolina. Fantastic. We have, okay, your special needs caregiver, also a parent to a 3-year-old and autistic 9-year-old based in Texas. My role is national. Great. Lanisha, nice to see you. We have more folks from New Jersey, one from South Carolina. So we're sort of it looks like a lot of East Coast folks here,
Mm.
but all across the East Coast. Okay, everyone, welcome. Thanks for sharing who you are and how you're arriving today. I'm going to pass it back to Kathleen, who's going to share with us today's agenda and some things we're hoping you take away today.
Yeah, so some of our goals for today, first of all, and most important, is to connect with one another a bit, learn, and have some fun. And we're going to be sharing a framework that Erica and I have created called our Framework for Well-Being, or the 4 R's of Well-Being. And we'd like to also dip into exploring some survival strategies. We're a bit into 2026 now, and it's always good to check back and see how we're doing with some of those survival strategies for the year as parents, as educators, in whatever capacity you're finding yourself. We also will provide you today with a link to a Padlet, which is a great landing page that houses all of our resources. So, all of our handouts, our contact information, there are videos and articles. Everything that we're sharing with you today is supported or is also available on the Padlet. So, you don't have to take furious notes. There's a lot on the Padlet for you. And you can use these activities or anything that you find there with colleagues, with the children that you're working with your children at home. Please feel free to make this your sort of turnkey package. Okay, so we're going to do another quick poll. Again, we're a little bit into 2026. Maybe some of the R&R you might have gotten over the holiday break is starting to wear away now. If you're in New Jersey, like many of us are, you're dealing with snow and a lot of snow days. How is your energy level as we get started today? Are you running on fumes and depleted, trying your best but stressed, energized and ready for anything, or optimistic and hopeful? If you could put your number in the chat, this just helps us get a read of the room and where everyone is today. I'm seeing a lot of trying my best but stressed, a little bit of energized and ready for anything, and more running on fumes. Trying my best, but stressed and running on fumes. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. This gives me an idea that maybe this presentation is going to be really helpful to many of you today because, yeah, we all are in a role of leadership or leadership in our families, our classrooms, taking care of others. And when we are in those roles, we tend to bump up against something that we call the helper's paradox, right? It's our job to be responsive, to take care of others, to be there, to meet their needs. And when we're doing that so fully, we run the risk of losing the energy that we have for ourselves. So the more energy we devote to helping others, the less energy we have for ourselves. So this can create a little bit of stress for ourselves, right? I love the definition of stress. That is the difference. Stress is the difference between the way things are and the way we think they should be. And the bigger that difference, the more stress we feel. So, just want you to take a minute to think about that. Give me a high five just by putting a 5 in the chat if this definition resonates with you. High five. Yeah. The bigger the difference between the way it should be or we think it should be and the way it actually is. Okay, so definitely leads to stress. And I'm going to share with you an example of something that's happened recently in my own life where I really felt the difference between the way things were and the way things should be or the way I thought they should be. So, my daughter, I said that my kids are grown and mostly flown. I still have a 25-year-old who's home when she's not out traveling the world. She has a unique position that allows her to do a lot of travel. And she's been to about, I don't know, 15 to 20 countries. So she's well versed in travel. She doesn't need her mom to help her. But normally, if she's going on a trip, couple of weeks before the trip, we spend a couple of sessions, 2 hours at a time or so, packing her bag together, talking about her plan. And it's a really nice time for us, right? It's just a bonding time, but it serves a purpose for me. It helps me to hear that she's got plans. I know where she's going. I know that she's done some of the backup checking around safety and other things. I know what gear she's packing. And I know I feel more settled knowing that she's ready. So recently, she was going off on one of these trips, and we were about a week out from her departure date, and she wasn't asking me for time. And I wasn't seeing the suitcases coming out. I wasn't seeing anything happening. And I started to get more and more stressed because I was worrying about the difference where I thought she should be, like pretty much packed or with a good plan that I was aware of, and where we actually were. I felt in the dark and wasn't sure what she was up to. So I'd like you to take a moment and think about a time or a situation like that for yourselves where you could feel the difference between the way things were and the way you thought they should be. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Okay. Now keep that situation in mind as we move forward through looking at the well-being framework and some of the pieces that we want to support you in putting this framework into action. So, this is the well being framework. It's based on the four R's of well being, which are reality, regulate, replenish, and reflect. Reality is quite simply knowing what's happening internally at the moment when we're stressed. Regulating is calming our body and finding ways to do that in the microsecond that it needs to happen so that we can regulate and move forward. Replenish talks about restoring our energy and pleasures in small, doable ways. And reflection is using our awareness and boundaries to build strategies and resilience. We want this to be sustainable so that we can use it throughout 2026 and beyond. So I'm going to start with looking at reality and regulate with you, and then Erica will take over and look at replenish and reflect. So let's move forward. In order to really start talking about reality and our emotions and what we're feeling in the moment, it helps to take a look at the cycle of an emotion. So, the cycle of emotion, and Erica, you might want to use your cursor to go around this with me. We start with a prompting event, which is what triggers us. We all know we have different triggers, right? When we're triggered by something, high emotions, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant, we go into an interpretation mode where we're trying to interpret it, where our perceptions are coming in. We're trying to really frame what's happening for us. That leads to a physical response, like an actual visceral response in our bodies, which can be comfortable or uncomfortable. It then leads to an urge to act. What do we want to do about this? Then an actual action, what we do. And today I'd like to highlight that that action can be an action or a reaction. And then with every action, there's a consequence or an effect, and it can be positive or it can be something that we're not as comfortable or happy about. So, an example, I'm going to go walk through this cycle with this story about my daughter. A couple of days before, in fact, it's actually the night before she was supposed to leave, she came to me and she said, Mom, I'm stressing out. And my flight is at 12 tomorrow. We have to be at the airport 3 hours in advance. And I'm not even packed. And I got triggered, right? I was like, I could feel it happening in my body. So my interpretation was, this is really irresponsible. She's being irresponsible and she doesn't seem to care about my time because I didn't have time that night. And she didn't understand that her stress is actually now contagious. And it felt a bit selfish, like, you got us here. Now I'm stressed even more along with you, right? My physical response was that I got noticeably tense. I could feel my neck like I carry all my stress right here, as many people do. And I know that my face, like, it was so obvious the way I felt. You could just see it on my face. My urge to act was that I wanted to go into lecture mode loudly and tell her that this was really inconsiderate. What like, why didn't she do this sooner? You should have done this, and blah, 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 you should have known better, basically, which is kind of shaming, right? But I just wanted to get it out. That's how I was feeling. The action that took place was more of a reaction. I exploded and I told her she was being irresponsible and inconsiderate and that she should know better. So there you go. I went from the urge to act right into that action. The after effect was that we each went to bed angry and it was disappointing. And the drive to the airport and the drop off was just not as joyous and exciting as it normally is. There was just a cloud over us. So I'd like you to revisit your own stress example from earlier and think about that cycle. Were you able to navigate the cycle where you were able to act deliberately, intentionally in a way that you wanted to, or react and maybe come out with an outcome that wasn't quite later on, looking back, what you would have hoped for? So keep that in mind as well. And we're going to move forward and talk about what Viktor Frankl, an Austrian neurologist and psychologist, as well as a Holocaust survivor, says about this space. And it's a space I think that's like I kind of visually see it on that emotional cycle. It's the space between, he says, the space between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So, how do we get to that pause, like to take that space or find that space between stimulus and response, and to empower ourselves to move from reaction, like I did, to intentional action? So, you can go to the next slide. There are two spots on the space that correlate with our well being framework. And that's going to help us to find our place where we can find that space to regulate. Okay, so the first space is between the prompting event and the interpretation. That's where the R of reality comes in. That's where we can start to realize that we're having an emotion, we've been triggered, and get in touch with what's really happening inside of us. The next space is to regulate, and that's where we're going to talk in a moment about strategies for self regulation and calming. But first, let's concentrate on that first R, which is the reality and diving into our emotions. So, what we know is that all emotions are communication, and they more often than not start with a physical, visceral response in our body. Something happens in us. And if we're paying attention to that physical, we know that something is happening, and it can be pleasant or unpleasant, but we can know by that visceral response. Like I got the weight on my shoulders all of a sudden. To really explore emotions and understand what's triggering that feeling, we have to get below the surface. And Erica and I really like to use the work of Elena Aguilar when exploring this. She is a coach who she teaches people to coach, and she coaches a lot around emotions. She has a handout that we're sharing with you about the 8 core emotions. So if you don't mind pulling that up, Erica, is that easy enough to do? Oh, well, let's look at it real quick here. The 8 core emotions are shame, anger, sadness, love, fear, jealousy, disgust, and happiness. So, how often have we had a feeling when we say, I'm angry? But Elena's work teaches us to go below that anger and see what's really driving that emotion. Because the emotion is anger, but there are feelings behind that anger. So, if we could, let's go to the core emotions worksheet. And I'm going to share it in the chat with you so that you can tap into it on your own screens if you'd like to.
Kathleen, I think I'm going to go through the Padlet just so everyone can see what
Sure, that
they
would be
have
great.
access to. So this is the
Hmm.
Padlet that we put together for you that has all of our handouts, our articles, videos. Um, and so the list of core emotions is in the Padlet, and you'll get a QR code and a link to that. The link is in the chat as well.
I think it needs to be copied back into
Oh,
this chat. I'm going to do it right now
okay.
because I put it in the chat before everybody got on. So here you go. You've got now the handout and the link to the Padlet. So if we could just, yeah, there we go. Just there we go around anger. Okay. So as I said, I felt angry, right? That was my first emotion that was obviously visible was anger. But when I took some time after I'd calmed down to drill into what was really driving my anger, I realized I was feeling a bit frustrated over the situation. I thought, like this should be different. I was cranky, definitely running on fumes that day, low energy, and she came to me late in the evening when I really didn't have the time. And I was indignant. I thought, like, this is unfair. I don't like that this is happening right now. This could have been prevented. But I also found when I drilled down into those feelings a bit more that there was the core emotion of sadness present. And under that sadness was this disappointment of like, this is a nice time that we usually spend together. It's a real connecting time before she goes away for a while. And it just sets things off on the right note. So I was sad that we had lost that opportunity and disappointed about it. So neuroscience tells us that when we can name a feeling, we can help to tame it. So, this speaks to the importance of us knowing our emotional vocabulary, having tools on hand for us to explore our emotions, but also teaching our children how deep emotions can be and giving them the vocabulary around that. So, using examples like, oh, I noticed you felt embarrassed, or it looked like you felt embarrassed. Was that true? Or, boy, today I felt really. Um, proud of myself, right? Just use it, bringing it into everyday conversation, helping them to build that vocabulary. Okay, so going back to our
Kathleen, can
cycle.
I just say another thing I love about what Elena says, and maybe you were going to say this too, is she says that stress is actually not a feeling or an emotion, that stress is actually a compilation of many feelings and emotions. And so I was just going back to like the stress thing you were talking about earlier, is when we feel that sense of stress, it's actually a buildup of emotions that's happening, and we're just extremely overwhelmed by it. So another really nice example of how naming our emotions could help us actually feel less stressed.
Yeah. And that leads us right into that next slide, slide 16, which is about regulation. So we're back on the emotional cycle. Go back one, Erica. There we go. So we said the prompting event and the interpretation is where we might be able to drill into those emotions and find out more about why we're being triggered. Now we're going to be talking about that physical response and that urge to act and regulation strategies around that to help us self-regulate and calm, because self-regulation can help us to understand our emotions, and understanding our emotions and triggers can help us lead us into self-regulation. So they really work well together, play together a lot. So how do we do that? I'm going to share with you a demonstration that is done by Dr. Dan Siegel. There's a video for it on your Padlet. And I don't know if I can be made bigger for this. Maybe you can even adjust your own screen, slide them to make me bigger so you can see this, and you can do it along with me. I can't see any of you right now, but I'm just going to imagine you doing this along with me. I have simplified this for today's purposes, but I encourage you to go watch Dan Siegel do this demonstration. It'll really help. And you can share a simplified version of this with children. They get it. They start to understand what's happening in their brain. And again, like he says, when they understand their brain and they understand their emotions, they can tame the situation more easily. So this is called hand model of the brain. And it's talking about what Erica just mentioned. If this was your brain, this makes a nice model of your brain. And if you fold your fingers right over your thumb like that, open your fingers up actually, your palm would be your brain stem. That's where all the autonomic or automatic things happen in your body, your blood pressure, your breathing, your pulse, your everything that just happens from the day you were born. You don't have to think about them. This center portion, let's say it's the center portion of the brain, is the limbic system. And that's where strong memories are stored and emotions and our fight, fright, and flight. It's like the safety radar of the brain. It's always looking around. Am I safe? What do I need to do? Am I connected? Am I regulated? Okay. Is something threatening? If you fold your fingers over, this outside part of the brain is the cortex, and that's where all of the thinking pieces come into play, like our fine and gross motor skills and our language skills, things that we have to develop from birth on, or maybe even slightly before birth. Okay, this section right here where your fingers are touching your thumb is our prefrontal cortex. And see how close it is to the limbic system? The prefrontal cortex is simplified, at the most simplified, kind of like a communication center of the brain. It helps us to regulate our emotions, it helps us to make decisions. And all day long, when we're regulating, our emotions are kind of filtering through our prefrontal cortex to our cortex back and forth, like things are going well when we are regulated and in a calmer state. But when we become overwhelmed with feelings, memories, emotions, trauma, what can happen is that prefrontal cortex can break down a bit. And we go into what Dan Siegel calls flipped lid. When we're in flipped lid, we're actually in a place where we're operating very much from our limbic system. Our prefrontal cortex can still be engaged somewhat, but it's not doing as well as it normally would. And we're really driven by our emotions, or can be. So when we're in flipped lid, this could be the state that when you walk away from an argument, you say, like, whoa, once you've calmed down, whoa, what did I say? What did I do? Who was that? Right? I'm sure we've all had that experience. And we start woulda, shoulda, coulda-ing with ourselves, like, oh, I should have done it better. I would have said this. I could have done it that way. That's because we were in flip lid. All right. We weren't at our best. So when we are in flip lid as well, this is not the time to communicate with other people or try to problem solve or try to teach when a child is having like a very explosive episode. So we need to wait. This is not a learning time. We need to wait until people are back down in their regulated state where they can hear, tap into their brain fully, and learn and communicate and problem solve together. Okay, so how do we do that? When we are on that emotional cycle and we're getting carried forward and we've got that urge to act, where do we find that small space, or how can we regulate so that we can bring ourselves back down to a calmer brain? So, we're all familiar, I'm sure, with different breathing exercises. Thankfully, this is something we talk about a lot more in schools. Even Elmo has some videos on breathing, belly breathing. Very common talk these days, right? We all heard of breathing. But these are some strategies that I wanted to highlight. Every single one of these 6 strategies is on your Padlet in video form, 2 to 3 minutes long, so that you can practice different strategies, share them with the children who are in your lives, and really keep them as tools in your toolbox. Please know, though, that not every strategy is right for every person. For example, box breathing can feel overwhelming to some children. So watch when you're sharing these strategies. Give them a few different strategies so that they can choose what's best for them, and be aware if there's resistance, that it could be because there actually is a physiological response to one of the strategies. So, just walking through them, box breathing, many of us have heard of, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding, hand on the heart technique, belly breathing, pursed lip breathing, and we're going to watch a little video on physiological sigh. This video is done by Andrew Huberman. You may have heard of his podcast, The Huberman Lab. He's a neuroscientist and he speaks a lot about not only science, but neurology, obviously, because he's a neurologist or neuroscientist, health and fitness. And I wanted to share this one because I had never heard of it until recently. It's easy, and he talks a little bit about the importance of having those moments where you can just drop in, stop, drop, and breathe to regulate. So let's take a look. And as you're looking, please think about that situation that we've brought forward in your own lives, where you were on that emotional cycle. Think about how this type of breathing might have been able to help you in the moment.
Billions of people suffer from stress, and there are tools to combat stress that involve things like meditation, breath work, good nutrition, good social connections, and avoiding all bad things in life. And while those are powerful, the problem is they require that people step away from the stress-inducing activity. By contrast, my lab and other laboratories have been very interested in developing tools that allow us to push back on stress, in other words, feel more calm in real time, meaning without having to disengage from the stress inducing activity. The best way that I am aware to do that is called the physiological sigh. A physiological sigh is a pattern of breathing that involves 2 inhales followed by an extended exhale. Physiological sighs were discovered in the 1930s as a pattern of breathing that people go into spontaneously when they are in claustrophobic environments or in deep sleep when there's a buildup of a gas called carbon dioxide in the bloodstream. Carbon dioxide triggers the impulse to breathe. There are neurons in the brain that know when carbon dioxide levels have gotten too high, and when the levels get too high, they trigger inhale and exhale, or double inhale and exhale. Now, you can do physiological sighs voluntarily anytime you're feeling too stressed and you want to feel more calm. You do it like this. So it's a double inhale, and typically the first inhale is longer than the second, but the second one is still important to do. And then a very long extended exhale. Typically both inhales are through the nose and the exhale is through the mouth. That's the most effective way to do the physiological sigh. However, if you can't breathe through your nose or your mouth for whatever reason, do it all through your mouth or all through your nose. The second inhale is really important because your lungs are not just 2 big bags of air. They're 2 big bags of air with lots of little sacs, millions of sacs. And if you were to lay out those sacs, their volume is as big as a tennis court. And that allows both the intake of more oxygen, but also the offload of carbon dioxide. So when you do the double inhale, it reinflates any of these little sacs that have collapsed. And in doing so, it allows you to offload more carbon dioxide. So if you're feeling stressed in any circumstance, inhale twice through the nose and then exhale long through the mouth. If you want, you can repeat it a second or even a third time, but typically just 1 or 2, maybe 3 physiological sighs are sufficient to bring your level of stress and alertness down very fast and allow you to feel more calm.
Okay. So give me a high five in the chat if you were doing the physiological sigh along with Andrew Huberman. I was too. Yeah. So I want you to think about the moment that we were talking about or that you were reflecting upon, being in that emotional cycle. Would a physiological sigh have helped you to regulate, right? So that you can tap into your reality, your emotions, and start to maybe plan for what's going to happen with that action. Again, regulation and reality play into one another very much. Having our emotions understood helps us with regulating, and regulating can help us tap into our emotions. So, Erica is now going to share with you the next 2 R's in our framework, which are replenish and reflect.
Okay, thanks, Kathleen. That was just so wonderful and informative. And Kathleen and I have done this presentation a couple of times, and I feel like every time we do it, I just learn even more. So it's just fantastic. So what we're going to do now is, and then Kathleen, can you copy the Slido link in the chat, please?
Yes.
Okay, we are going to go into our replenish. So what I like to think of this as is I like to have an analogy of like an ATM machine. And we need money in the ATM machine in order to take money out. And so replenishing is really filling up our ATM machine. So what are the things that we do to restore ourselves? And these aren't things necessarily that are regulating like breath work, although it could be some kind of breath work, but it's different. It's not like we're in a stressful situation and we're trying to calm ourselves down. This is like when we're not in a stressful situation and we are enjoying ourselves. So Kathleen just put a link in the chat to a site that we're going to go to called Slido. So you can either use the QR code or you could use this link here. And what I'd like you to do is just share one thing that restores you, even if it's just for 30 seconds. And so I'm going to actually leave my screen here and I'm going to go to our Slido and we'll see what other folks are also sharing. I don't think I could make this full screen.
I can see it. Would you like me to read some? Oh, there it is.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, I can see it. It's just
Yep.
not full screen. Okay. So let's see. We have calling a friend. Um, gray. I'm curious what gray is. Is that your friend Gray, maybe. Watching a funny cat video. I love that. That's something we're going to talk about in a minute. Um, Nature, music, walking. Earl, I'm assuming Earl means Earl Grey tea.
It was a
Um,
hot cup of Earl Grey tea.
it
Sorry, I'm
was
English, so
a
that's like it triggers those childhood memories, like that just feeling safe and like warm and like home when you're a child.
I love
So
that.
every time I have like a hot mug of Earl Grey, it's like all is well in the world for a
I
few
love that.
seconds.
Yes.
And yeah, I don't know why I did it all as individual words. Heck no, take,
That's okay. It's more
take.
interesting that
Okay.
way. It's like poetic. Um, okay, we have if and also if you see one of the boxes as a little bit bigger, it means that many people have shared that idea. So it looks like music is something that really is something that replenishes folks. A cup of coffee, listening to my cat purring, that sounds so lovely. I'm actually feeling just relaxed reading these. So thank you all. I'm going to toggle back to my screen here. Oh, there's still some coming in. A beach day, especially in this terrible weather we're having. So that sounds luxurious. Comedy shows, calling a friend, more music. All right. Thank you all so much for entering. Oh, your mom. That's so lovely. My mom has the opposite effect. Um, okay, so I want to talk a little bit about this idea of micro restoration. So there's extensive research across positive psychology and nervous system science and organizational psychology that shows that micro moments, which are short bursts of calm or joy or rest, can actually significantly improve well-being and reduce stress. And that these micro breaks, so these really small breaks, restore energy even more effectively than long breaks when they're taken regularly. So the practices will accumulate over time and are especially effective for parents and those people working and caregivers and those people working in high stress professions. So just some of the examples, and you all shared your examples a moment ago, but these are just some of the examples I came up with. Um, so walking is one that was something you all put on your Slido, a favorite song. Music seems to be something that really uplifts folks. I love this one, sending a gratitude text. Sometimes for me, I'll just like get swept up in the wave of gratitude and just send it to a friend or a family member. I feel good, they feel good. A no boundary statement. And so we're going to talk about boundaries in a minute as being something that can really support us. Changing your sensory input. So this to me is something that I need to do a lot, like moving different places where I'm working, getting out, like seeing the sunlight, opening a window, anything that changes the vibe can be really supportive. A funny video. It sounds like some folks like to watch sweet cat videos. That sounds lovely. And then I love this one, a joy anchor object on your desk. Something I have that is so random and strange, but I love it is like a little bottle of nail polish that's full of glitter. And it's like all different colors. It's rainbow. And so I just look at it and I feel good. I don't necessarily put it on or need to wear it, but like, what's something that brings you joy that you could look at every day and feel supported by? So if there's other ones and you want to put those into the chat, please feel free to do that. We, continue to love to hear from you. And Kathleen, if you don't mind, if there's anything like standing out, if you wouldn't mind sharing that, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what I want you to do now, given the list of things that you saw with Slido, and the list of things I just shared right now, I want you to create a list of all the ways that you can replenish yourself. And so you could just jot it in your notes in your phone or write it down on a list on the back of a piece of paper. But it's really helpful. When I did this exercise, what I found was that the most common ones kept coming out at me, right? Like, well, I like a good massage, or, I like hanging out with my dog, or I like getting outside for a walk. But then as I did it, I actually kind of got a little bit deeper into some things that felt really replenishing. So let's just take a minute now to just create that list for yourself. And then after you create the list, I'd love if you could circle your top three that you think would be supportive to you right now. So we'll take a minute to do that. And if you are able to do your list and circle your top three, and then you want to share those in the chat, that would be great. Most importantly, this is something that can help support and sustain you. I'll just share just quickly while you all are jotting down here. Something that I've been experiencing recently is a lot of cabin fever being inside, especially in this cold New Jersey winter. We've been just having piles and piles and piles of snow. No one can go anywhere. And my kids have been home a lot, and it's been hard to work and all the things. I've been feeling very stressed, just getting anything done, having them around me all the time. And then I remembered one of the things I put on my menu. And one of those things is that I just sometimes will sit back and just try to feel a sense of gratitude. And it sometimes feels a little woo woo or spiritual or something like that. But um, actually, what I've thought of recently is that my kids will not be home forever. And so I've been trying to feel a sense of gratitude of just like hearing their voices in the house, eating messy snacks, that I have to clean up. But that sense of just like sitting back and feeling gratitude is a nice one to put on the menu. Okay, so if you're open to putting yours in the chat, that would be fantastic. And if not, that's okay too. So we have taking a walk outside between meeting that cup of Earl Grey tea and looking at pictures of my last vacation. I love that one. Whenever I go to a museum, I always take pictures of the artwork and then I'll look at it that night just to like remind myself of how beautiful everything was. All right, thank you for chiming in. Coffee or lunch with a friend, sitting out in the side of the sun, taking a mini nap. Man, that sounds glorious and hard, but that sounds like something that would be fantastic. All right, I'm going to move forward, but please still feel free to enter these in. This is for you to really take with you and make sure you hold yourself accountable to it. Maybe you want to keep the list on your desk or put it in your phone, just reminding yourself of the importance of replenishment. So the next question that comes up is what is draining us? And so, as we all read and saw in the chat box from earlier, like in the last 2 weeks, I think most of us have felt stretched thin, exhausted, emotionally drained. And we often use the same word to help to describe things that are actually different experiences. So, we use the term I'm stressed. But there's different ways of feeling this overwhelmedness that we feel. And so we're going to talk about the difference between stress and burnout and compassion fatigue, because they can all look alike on the surface, but underneath, they're actually not the same. And the way we care for ourselves actually depends on knowing which one is showing up. So we have stress. So stress is that, kind of short-term pressure, overwhelm, like Kathleen had mentioned with her daughter. It was tied to a specific situation, and when maybe they moved past that, the demand decreased. And so the intervention for that is really, regulating, like practicing those deep breaths, really understanding our emotions, and just practical support. So maybe we need to go talk to a friend, or we need to just take a walk. That can really resolve some stressful situations. But then we come to burnout. And burnout is different, right? Chronic emotional and physical exhaustion. And it's caused by this sustained amount of stress and lack of control or unclear expectations. And so the intervention for this is actually different. We might need some different kind of replenishment, right? So maybe in the moment, burnout is not going to respond to deep breathing, but we need to make sure that we're replenished in these wonderful ways that you all have put in the chat box. We might need some different structural support. So maybe that looks like changing the way our afternoons look with our children or asking for help, and sustainable boundaries. And so we can think about burnout and we can think about the ways that we can support ourselves in burnout by thinking about, do we have protected parent time? Do we have time that's just for ourselves? Do we have time not with our children? Do they know the boundaries of that, right? Do we know the boundaries and do they know the boundaries? and just being able to ask for help. So those are some ideas of how we can support burnout. And then, of course, we have compassion fatigue. And I think all of us here are caregivers or all of us are parents. And so we're all in the midst of this all the time. I had a friend who's a child psychologist once tell me that parenting is like swimming in a bowl of pea soup. You just like never know where you are. Everything is all overwhelming. Nothing is clear. And I just love that analogy because I feel like we all feel that way at some time. And so this is really the impact of supporting others. We sometimes call it the cost of caring, and it can look like burnout, but it's a little bit of a different situation. It's more of an empathy overload. And so, really, we want to think about what kind of emotional boundaries we are setting and how we're recovering. And so, some examples of what we can do to support ourselves with compassion fatigue. And this is like obviously me saying this and knowing that my practice with this is very imperfect and also it's really hard. But I love this idea of having repair instead of perfection. So if we can think about that, it's more important for us to repair situations than it is for us to be the perfect parent, the perfect caregiver. I think it can relieve a lot of pressure and stress. And we can also think about it as best we can, even though it's really hard like thinking about reducing our emotional over functioning. Like how much are we coming to the rescue of our children or the folks we take care of? How much are we absorbing of their own emotions? There's a saying that says you're only doing as well as your least well child or something like that. And I always that always really is something that I hold to my heart is true. Um, are we thinking about fixing? Are we thinking about anticipating needs? So all of these things we do just unconsciously can really cause that sense of compassion fatigue. And so, well, okay, so now we can think about if we know the difference between stress and burnout and compassion to fatigue, well, the next natural question is, well, what protects us from falling deeper into forms of overwhelm? And one of the most powerful tools that we have are boundaries, and they're the ones that people can see and the ones that they can't see. So we have external boundaries, which are observable limits like schedules or availability or physical space or communication rules. So something like, after 9 p.m., I'm off duty unless it's an emergency. I think sometimes that could be a luxury, right? Like, yeah, right, our kids are going to respond to that. But what is maybe one external boundary that you think that you could have that will be respected by your child? Something like you pack your own backpack in the morning, right? Like I just get into these natural habits with my kids where like it's like, okay, I'm gonna just throw your lunchbox in here and throw your water bottle in here. And I end up being so exhausted by the end of the morning. And then I'm just like, wait a second, I can have a boundary that like you are old enough. I have a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old. You can pack your own backpack. And how can we both be on board with that boundary? And then we have these internal boundaries, right? And that's really where that compassion fatigue, comes into play. So these are like our mental and emotional limits. And so examples of that could be detachment from our children's crises, saying no without guilt, and resisting the urge to fix everything. Easier said than done, obviously. So something we can say to ourselves could be, I can support my child without absorbing their emotions. I am not going to push through when I feel completely depleted. So what are some of those internal boundaries that maybe we can strengthen, so that we don't experience those forms of burnout and stress and compassion fatigue? And so, if boundaries are so protective, why are we not all walking around with the strongest ones, right? Why is it so hard? And the reason why, and maybe you have a different reason why, and I want to make space for your thoughts too, is because for parents and for helping professionals, setting boundaries can feel very emotionally complicated. So, reason number one could be that we want our kids to be happy, right? So, excuse me, it's hard to set limits when we think that we're going to cause tears, when we're going to cause conflict or disappointment or pushback. I think sometimes for me, like I try and avoid pushback at all costs because it's exhausting. And so I just do things to please. Um, but it ends up biting me in the end because I'm doing more of the work and I'm also resentful. So we've absorbed messages about being a good parent. So sometimes, we're believed that that patience is kind of saying yes to kids and when we set limits, we're somehow being harsh. And maybe we didn't even learn that, but it feels that way. So what kind of messages are you feeling about being a good parent and how can setting boundaries be complicated? We're tired. Probably don't need to explain that. We are, when we're overwhelmed, we want to avoid conflict, just like I was saying before. And sometimes it's just easier to give in and overlook things than it is to set boundaries. We can confuse boundaries with control. So something I have to tell myself all the time is that resistance is normal and in fact quite healthy for kids to push back. And it doesn't mean the boundary was wrong. It just means it's uncomfortable and kind of annoying to deal with. Um, we feel responsible for fixing our kids' feelings. So like when kids melt down, we rush to soothe them, and sometimes that can blur limits. And then we feel guilty needing time or space. So you know, I think my relationship with my parents is very different than the relationship I have with my kids in a lot of positive ways, but I think also in ways that feel almost like too much. And so sometimes I do feel guilty for going out with friends one night or just saying, like, I need my time and space to myself. But in actuality, kids thrive when parents are rested and emotionally steady. So, how can we take more time and space for ourselves? So I'm just curious from you, and thank you all from the earlier slide for entering in some of your thoughts about your replenishment strategies. But I'm curious, is there any other reasons that you think boundaries are hard? Uh, Anything that's tricky for you? Or on the other hand, maybe you're really good at boundaries and maybe there's something you want to share about that. So if you care to enter any thoughts or ideas you're having into the chat, we'd love to hear from you. I'll wait like just, I don't know, 30 seconds or so and see. Um, oh, Kathleen, thank you. Yes. So this
Just
really
tying it to that, right? The more we give, or allow, or don't create those kind and firm boundaries, boundaries that are respectful to the child, but also respectful to ourselves, the more worn out we get and the more we feel sort of trodden upon. And that's the helper's paradox. We just don't have anything left for ourselves.
yes. Yes. Thank you. That's a great link back. All right, I'll hold the chat box open for another minute. This is like heavy stuff. Um, oh, Alexis wrote, when you first start learning how to set boundaries, you're also unlearning old habits, right? It's so much more complex than just setting a new boundary. There's also so much you're coming in with, and so many habits you're unlearning. That's a really, really astute observation. Um, Thank you for sharing. So, as a special needs parent where he's being naughty or does not understand, it's tough because I don't know his cognitive ability. That is really, really a challenge. And thank you for sharing that. Um, and like, do you feel in some ways that you're being too tough because there's like a lack of understanding? Is that, yeah, that's a very real reality. Um, And I found it easier to create older as I get, but I still feel guilt sometimes, right? I wonder if in some ways um, guilt is something that's just baked into us as a parent and or a caregiver, and just accepting that guilt. Oh, okay. Thank you so much for coming. Actually, I should have to look at the time. I think we have 3 more minutes. Okay.
I just want to
So
say that as parents, we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we have available to us and the understandings that we have. And the fact that people are here just learning more is amazing. And, kudos to you for that. It's a
yeah.
gift to your children.
So, reflecting on all this gives us permission to be human and not superhuman. And when we can name our overwhelm and understand our boundaries, we can begin to use these tiny reflective pauses and make more sustainable decisions. And so, what I want you to think about is we're not going to have time to do this exercise right now just because we only have 2 minutes left. But I want you to think about, in general, what drains you? What's something that's a primary source of draining your energy? What's something that restores you? And we've kind of already talked about some of those things. What boundaries might support your sustainability? And what boundaries are possible to try in the next week. And as I said before, this presentation is always so wonderful to give because it helps me to really reflect on myself. And so when I put that backpack boundary in, it's really because my mornings are so draining, because I feel like I'm doing so much for children who know how to do the things. And so what restores me is being able to drink my coffee and to be able to sit back and know that my children can do the things I'm asking them to do. And so, what might support sustainability is really having the expectation that they do the thing that they need to do, and I can try that, right? I can definitely see how it goes and expect pushback, but in the end, I know it's a healthy boundary. So, just to think about, not necessarily to actually, if you want to rate it in the chat, you can, but just to think about what's one boundary you might experiment with in the next few weeks, given all that we've talked about and all we know. And again, I'd love if you wanted to enter your ideas into the chat, we'd love to hear from you. But as you are doing that, I'm just going to move on to our final closing here. As I said before, Kathleen and I have done this a couple of times. We love giving this presentation. If you have any questions, we're very happy. Please, this copy of this presentation will be sent to you as well as the Padlet. You'll have all of the information. But if you have any questions or need anything additional, please feel free to email us. You'll also get an evaluation, a quick evaluation form, so we can know how well we did and if we needed to do anything better. Um, and thank you all so much. Hold on, there's just one thing in the chat box I want to make sure that I read. Scheduling kid, oh, not scheduling kid activities every weekend, taking one weekend off. Oh my gosh, that's
Mm.
so speaking our language. Yes. It is not all about taking our kids to every single activity that they constantly want
Yeah,
to go to. Thank you so much.
for sure. And
Yeah.
you know what? At the end of the day, they really value that time too, to
Yes.
decompress and just connect.
Yes.
So, yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
It
you
was
all
really
so
lovely to be with
much.
you today.
We love being with you and have a wonderful rest of the day. We know you spent lunch with us today, so we appreciate that. And we hope to see you again. This is a series that we put on, so it'll be a monthly series. So wherever you found out about information from, um, we will be hosting one of these once a month. So please come and join us and have a wonderful rest of your day.